it just all started to connect with me, and some other experiences that went on that I can only say felt like God speaking to me, that just happened. And I came to a place where I couldn't deny it. Like, which I think was a hard place for me to get to. And maybe the reason it took 20 years, because I'm so like analytical, and I think through everything. And I think that you can't think your way to God.
Welcome to the Daron Earlewine Podcast, where we awaken you to become who you were born to be. Here's your host, Daron Earlewine.
Question of the week: would accomplishing your greatest dreams fix your life? Big question. Let's find some big answers. Welcome back to the Daron Earlewine Podcast, where each week I'm going to awaken you to become who you're born to be, and the crowd goes wild. Thanks for joining us again. So stoked you guys are with me again this week, and appreciate those of you that have followed or subscribed to the YouTube channel or subscribed to the Spotify or Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. And just once again, thanks for being a part of the podcast. And if you want to get more connected to me and what we're doing here at DaronEarlewine.com, just go to any social media profile. By that I mean Instagram or Facebook, and give us a like or a follow. It's episode 5. And on this episode, very stoked. We have the world famous winner of The Voice, Hoosier, Indiana's own Josh Kaufman, on the show today, and we have an interview that I know is going to inspire you. There was just some cool moments in this conversation I had with Josh, of just his journey towards chasing his lifelong dreams, balancing that with things that seem to make more sense as far as career paths, and as well the spiritual, I guess you could say, spiritual awakening that kind of surprised him. That's coming up later here in the podcast, and I'm really excited about that. But here's a question. We asked the question of the day, right? Is, would accomplishing your biggest dream fix your life? And that's the context of the conversation that we have with Josh, because his lifelong dream was to be an artist, was to make it, if you will, in the music industry. And it's a pretty big deal to win a nationwide singing competition, a show like The Voice. You got millions upon millions of people watching the episodes, voting for you, polling for you, becoming fans. He reached out, he took a risk, he touched that, he tastes that dream. But what he unpacks is the issue of what happens when tasting a dream doesn't satisfy your soul. And what I think can apply to us in our conversation today is the reality that I believe we all actually believe a false narrative in our life, that if we accomplish our greatest dream, that it will satisfy our greatest longings, that our life, if you will be fixed. And the deal about that is that I'll talk a lot about purpose here on the podcast. I mean, that's what I'm about, awaken you to become who you were born to be. I believe you are created on purpose and for a purpose. And so much of what I'm going to talk about is helping you move towards and accomplish that purpose. And chasing dreams is something that I'm big about. Reimagining what could be possible in your life is something that I'm all about. And the reality is, so much of our life is the fact that we're created for that. We're created in the image of God, who is the most creative being in the world. He actually is in touch and communicates to our imagination. He places dreams and visions and ideas within us. In fact, the Word of God teaches us in the book of Acts, right, that this movement of Jesus is going to be a movement of visionaries and dreamers. And so I'm all about encouraging us towards that path. However, I think that the danger there, and here's the reality, is that anything that God creates and gives us that is created for good and for fulfillment in our life, the backside of that is everything that good that God gives us, the devil wants to pervert, to actually steal our joy and to actually begin to sabotage our life. And this is no different, because so often what can happen is, as we're pursuing our dreams, there's no guarantee that we're going to be the best or experience our dream at the top level of which it's possible. And what begins to happen in this is, I believe the devil can begin to sow a seed of envy in us that begins to sabotage our life. And this deception, right, that if I can actually fulfill or touch or experience my dream in its greatest capacity, then everything in my life will be fixed, is a lot of it is fueled by envy. And here's the tough part is in a story like Josh's, right, is a lot of people may have a dream to sing. A lot of people have abilities to sing. So you have your talents and you have your dreams. If you know what, I want to sing and I want to be a professional musician or artist. And you think, you know what, I'm going after this. I'm pursuing this dream. And if I could get signed, if I could release an album, if I could be on TV, if I could, you keep putting out all these scenarios that if I got there, if I touched it, if I taste that, all of these things that are empty or longing or are hurting my life, longings that I have, all of them would be fulfilled and life would be good once I got there. And it may not be singing for you. It could be once I make this much money, once my company goes public, once I'm teacher of the year, your dream could be, maybe you don't have a career outside the home career dream. For you, it could be once I have kids or once my kids go to college. Keep filling in the blank. You have these dreams that you may have talent to do that God has given you. And the danger can be that you believe that by touching them or tasting them, that everything will be fixed. The dangerous and sometimes debilitating moment is when you do actually get an opportunity to touch or to taste or experience one of those dreams and you still find your soul wanting. And that's a lot of what Josh unpacks in our conversation with him, is this idea that he kind of put his whole life and career and everything else on hold to go pursue this dream, and he got it. He won the voice. He was a household name in millions and millions of homes. He had financial gain like he'd never known in his life. He had, stardom like he'd never had in his life. And two things is life at the top doesn't quite last as long as we would want it to. And even when you're there, you realize maybe this wasn't everything that I thought it was going to be. Maybe the deepest longings of my soul aren't going to be met by accomplishments. I want you to think about that for a minute, because that's a big thought. And a lot of times I don't like it because I love accomplishing things. So often I can get caught up in the lie that I am, right? There's an identity statement that I am what I accomplish. And if I ever get close to actually accomplishing one of my life dreams, the thought is then it will be it. I'm going to tell you, friends, it's not. And so knowing that, and you hear that through Josh's story, that's a life I've lived. I was able to taste it and touch just a little bit of a childhood dream of mine. And in the moment of it, I experienced some of the greatest pain and loss and betrayal ever in my life. And in that moment, it was a really, really confusing and difficult stew of life to figure out what's next, who am I, where am I, and I've had to unpack that, honestly, for decades after that moment. But I just want to tell you from the past, and as you're going to learn here and talk about in Josh's episode and in Josh's interview here, is if you're at a point in your life where you're believing that the peace that I am longing for, the fulfillment in my heart, in my soul, in my whole being, it will happen when this event happens or this accomplishment happens. I want you to know that you're believing a lie and you're setting yourself up for disappointment. Because the purpose in your life, we talk about God creating on purpose and for purpose. The purpose of your life is not accomplishment. The purpose of your life, because you're a human being created in the image of God, is relationship. That has to be foundational to your pursuits, or you're going to find yourself wanting. Here's a truth that I want to hit you with today, that when I thought about it, I thought, you know what, I need to think about that a little bit more. Because in your life, like I said, accomplishments are great, but they're not what you were created for. But there is an interesting balancing act here where finding hope for ourselves that we need in our heart and our soul is always found in the future. And so you're going to hear me talk a lot about that hope is found in the future. And if you're at a place where you're feeling hopeless, or maybe you're striving for an accomplishment, or maybe it even some kind of breakthrough in a relationship, is if you're losing hope, cast your eyes a little higher on the horizon and focus on the future, because the future is where hope resides, right? The future is the home of hope. But here's the counterpart I want to bring with that. But the present is the land of peace. Let me say it one more time. The future is the home of hope, but the present is the land of peace. And as we talk about pursuing these dreams and moving towards who God has created us to be, I want us to throw our gaze in the future and because the future, right? It's the home of and has the opportunity and the power of yet. Right? That word yet is such a powerful thing to get to the place where you go, you know what? I haven't written my first book. You can stop there, right? And you can find hopelessness, despair, discouragement, unless you add a future word like this, yet. I haven't written my first book yet. Now I'm in the future. Now I have hope again, right? I haven't gotten married and had a family yet. My kids aren't the best behaved people in the universe yet. My marriage is not the kind of experience of love and of hope and fill in the blank, whatever, yet. Future tense thinking brings us to hope. And that's one thing I want to make sure that we're always moving towards. But if our whole life, if we move from my hope is out there to that's when I will experience peace when I get there, we're going to miss the fact that the present is the land of peace. And that God wants to bring us peace and fulfillment in our souls on the path towards the future purposes of our life. And this is difficult work because I know for me, it's easier for me to just keep moving forward, to be excited about new and shiny and potential in the future, and not do the hard work, the difficult work, the vulnerable work of finding peace in the present. And as we talk through this issue and as you listen to Josh's interview, I just want you to maybe take some time after you listen to reflect and to look at your life right now and say, you know, where in my life is there a lack of peace? Right? Peace is this. Peace is freedom from disturbance or tranquility. Peace is a state or a period in which there is no war or war has ended. So if there's places in your life right now, and oftentimes it's in the context of relationships, right? Because life is relationships, everything else is just the details. Thank you, Gary Smalley. Is there a place right now where there's disturbance and a lack of tranquility? Are there places in your life right now where there is war and there is strife? If there is, I want to tell you this. Nothing that you can accomplish in the future is going to bring peace to those issues. The good news is right now God is offering, and it is great enough and is present enough that he can lead you to a place where you can experience peace in the present. And here's the good news. No matter if you accomplish those dreams in their fullness or not, even in the fullness or their failure, you can still have peace. 3 ways I want you to look at this idea of peace, and then we're going to jump into this interview with Josh, is this. First and foremost, it starts with peace with God. This is where it starts because this is what you were created for, a relationship with God in which he guides and he directs and he loves and he fulfills you because you were created in his image for a relationship with him. So the first step you have to find is you move through life with a peace with God. Now there's 2 ways that you accomplish peace with God. It's this. It's mercy and forgiveness. You approach God knowing that he loves you above and beyond your wins or your losses. It's not performance-based. It's mercy-based, is that God is merciful to you in your failures and your sins and your struggles, and he offers you forgiveness so that you can step into a confident, peace-filled covenant relationship with him. You can have that now because the present is a time of peace, and it starts with peace with God. The next thing is this. It's peace with yourself. This one, I almost think finding peace with yourself is almost more difficult than peace with God. Because peace with God, God is perfect and he's holy and he's loving and he's consistent and he name all of the good things is in his character. difficult thing about finding peace with yourself is, I don't know about you, but I find myself to continue screwing things up that makes it difficult not to be mad or angry or frustrated with myself. But you have to have peace with yourself if you're going to move into the future God's created you for. And you want to know how you find peace with yourself? 2 elements: mercy and forgiveness. Peace with God, mercy and forgiveness. Peace with yourself, mercy and forgiveness. My life changed a couple years ago, or it's continued the process of transformation. I guess one can say it changed. My life is continually being changed. But I was meeting with my counselor, and meet with her once a month. And if you're not in a relationship with a professional counselor, I would suggest it to be a Christian one, a biblical one, who is helping you ask the difficult questions, who's helping you look deeper. But I began to uncover an issue, or she helped me uncover an issue that I had about, if a scale of 1 to 100 of self-compassion, I was at about a 2. I had very little self-compassion for myself. In fact, most of the time when I talked about myself, it was super aggressive and super negative and very, very judgmental. And I don't know how you talk to yourself about yourself, but I was really mean to myself. So most of the times in my brain, I was a freaking idiot. You're a freaking moron. How stupid can you be? I don't know how you talk to yourself, but I wasn't talking to myself very nicely. And so I struggled to ever have a sense of peace with where I was at with myself, because I assumed God was mad at me. I was still struggling with peace with God. And so giving myself an understanding of mercy and forgiveness was almost non-existent. And my counselor turned me on to a book called Self-Compassion by Kristen Neff is the author. If you're looking for a new book to listen to or to read, I want to highly suggest this book, Self-Compassion. It was a game changer for me. And in the book, what Kristen Neff leads you to do is to come to a place where you are challenged to write a self-compassionate letter to yourself. And when I first read it, I was like, that sounds super stupid. That seems, some kind of counselor mumbo jumbo. And it was, but it was life-changing and awesome. And so I took time to actually write a letter to myself. And what I had to do was think of it in the context of who is the most compassionate, loving, good friend that I have. And so for me, I had to think, well, it would be Jesus. So how would Jesus write me a letter about me through the lens of compassion? And as I finished this letter and wrote it and read it back to myself, I was broken and overwhelmed with mercy and forgiveness. And it was a game changer for me. And I want to encourage you, if you're maybe where I'm at, is maybe you have been chasing dreams and the fact that you haven't accomplished them in their fullness, you have a sense of hate for yourself, or you talk down to yourself, or you've lost hope or confidence in yourself. And in that, you've lost peace in the present. I want to encourage you to step into this exercise of writing a letter of self-compassion to yourself. And here's what I want to do to help you with this, is if you would like to use my letter as a kind of a base level, I want to email it to you. And so if you would like this self-compassion letter, I've actually edited it out where I've taken my name and edited it out and left a blank so you can get it and just put your name in it and begin to read it. And maybe this would be maybe just a starter kit for you for self-compassion. And then after you read the one that I could send to you, then you could write your own from scratch. But if you'd like the kind of body of this letter, to help you in this process, email me. Just Daron@blackbirdmission.com. Send me an email, and I will send you a copy of the self-compassion letter, Daron@blackbirdmission.com. I'll send it over to you. Because if you're going to be on this journey, you've got to step into this understanding of peace with yourself. The last one is this: peace with others. Peace with God, peace with yourself, peace with others. Now, the two ways that we get to peace with others, it's world-changing. You've never heard me say anything like this before, but it's this. It's mercy and forgiveness. It's the same too. It's the same stuff. How about a laugh track? Okay, thank you. Terrible jokes, but I had to find some reason to push the buttons. It's mercy and forgiveness. That is the road to peace. And if you look at our country right now, every day the news is filled with hate and violence and revenge. And everyone is so passionate about justice and justice and justice in whatever category it may be. And justice is on the heart of God. But here's what I know about you and about me is when I'm trying to find peace with myself and with God and with others, here's what I find often is that I'm really passionate about justice for you, but guess what I beg for me? Mercy. How often have you done something wrong and hurt someone and you know you're in the wrong and you've come to that person and you've said, would you give me the most aggressive justice possible? Like, when's the last time you apologized to somebody and that's what you started with? Hey, I've wronged you greatly, and would you just really bring some justice down on me? We don't ever start there. When we know we've wronged someone, when we know we're in the wrong, we beg for mercy. We apologize and we beg for mercy. And that's a vulnerable, and it's a humble, and it's a difficult place to be in. But if we're going to live with peace in our life as we pursue the dreams God's placed in our hearts, we have to have peace with others. And that process comes through mercy and forgiveness. And the way we find that is by basically experiencing the mercy and forgiveness that God gives us. We experience that so we can extend it to others. Because here's what I can tell you, and Josh will talk about this in the interview we're going to jump into right now, is in this journey of pursuing dreams, the things that God has placed in your heart, the context to fulfill those and to walk them out is always going to be relationships. It's always going to be with people. And if you don't have peace with God to teach you how to live and to love and to forgive and to serve and to find fulfillment, it's going to derail. If you can't find peace within yourself, you will self-sabotage your pursuits of the dreams God's placed in your heart. And if you can't find and sustain and maintain peace with others, even if you accomplish the greatest tasks, the greatest dreams, the greatest accolades, if the relationships around you are falling apart, you will lose the joy of the accomplishment. Mercy and forgiveness are the path to peace that God has for us. I know you're going to be inspired by what Josh shares, and I want to jump into the interview right now as he walks us through the process of chasing a dream, of the disillusionment after accomplishing it, and then the discovery of God's closeness and peace with God in the process. Let's jump into our interview right now with Josh Kaufman. Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Daron Earlewine Podcast, another one of our Born to Be interviews, and here with the winner of The Voice, personal friend of mine, basically. I mean, we go way back, Josh Kaufman. Josh, welcome back. I think we've had you on the podcast. Welcome back, man.
Thank you. Well, I don't think I've done the podcast before, but we've definitely done a lot of the other stuff in the past.
Yes. So I want to give the backstory because a lot of people won't know it. Is I want to say, and man, you're going to have to help me with the dates here. I want to say probably back in like 2009, 2010, maybe 2011-ish.
That seems right. Yeah.
Okay. We were doing pub theology at a little smoky bar here in Indianapolis called Joe's 2. And your buddy and our friend Cliff Ritchie, phenomenal artist in many forms, we had booked him to come down and to be the musical guest. And the great thing about booking Cliff is Cliff always brought like an entourage of artists with him. You know what I mean? And I remember the one night he had done his first set, and before he went out for a second set, Cliff came over and he's like, "Hey," he's like, my buddy Josh is here. He's like, "Would you mind? I know you booked me, but would you mind if he just goes up and let him do 2 or 3 songs?" I'm like, "Sure, Cliff. I trust you, dude. I'm sure you brought great artists." And dude, you walked up on stage and went into, I think you did a Jackson 5 song, and I can't remember, you did like at least like maybe like 2 Motown-esque songs. And I remember the whole bar was like, what in the world is happening at Joe's 2? Because I mean, I'm sure you've been told, if people watched your journey in The Voice, they know you. Your voice is so amazing. It's so much bigger than your body, right? And it was right. Like, I can't believe what we're listening to. And it's from that moment I knew, like, okay, if this guy keeps being dedicated to this journey, that's a world-class talent. And so, do you remember that night?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I came out with Cliff. I remember that first time, and I came out with him one other time too. But yeah. I totally remember that. I mean, we still play together. I've played with Cliff for over 20 years now. So, but yeah, that was that was fun times.
So let's go back 2011, 2012. You're gigging with Cliff. You still are now, but where were you at that point, Josh, as far as like seeking, who you were born to be, that life purpose piece? At that point, had you made a decision that singing and performing and being an artist will be your kind of lane? Where were you at that point?
Yeah, that's kind of interesting because I have like tons of different interests. And so like I've always done music since I was a little kid. And so that's always been a piece. But then like I like to like learn and study things and figure things out. And so once I got married and started having kids, and I was kind of like, okay, I'm playing these little gigs around town and I'm not making very much money, and maybe I need to start thinking about like what are the other options out there. So I ended up going back to school. I had my undergraduate degrees in philosophy, so I went back to school for philosophy and was thinking, well, maybe I'd like to teach and do the the university professor academia kind of thing, and got basically through all the coursework of a master's program. And because of events and the way things went down, I didn't finish the last like big, huge exam that I had to do for my master's in philosophy. But by that point, I also had kind of decided that even though I loved studying that, I didn't know that I wanted to go into like the academia thing full time. And I was playing music a little bit more again. And I just started to realize, man, I don't know that I think I have to figure out some way to make music the main thing.
So is that a passion deal? Was it like you, because I know a lot of people I talk to, like they're good at something, maybe they're good at math, or they can write, code for programs, or they can build stuff, or, for you, I mean, at a master's level, you are obviously proficient and good at academic studies, but is it a passion thing? Was it almost like I can do this, but was it like, I kind of feel like I must pursue this side?
Yeah. I mean, that's what it felt like at the time. Honestly, I feel like it's just the makeup of my brain. I'm real like left brain and right brain at the same time. So yeah. I tend to, this has been the battle of my life, like going back and forth. Like, do I need to like focus on what I'm thinking and talking about and trying to like work in those kind of ways? And then I hear a beautiful piece of music. I'm like, oh, I have to do that. I got to like make more music and spend more time doing that. And at that point, though, I had put so much work into the academic side, and I'd kind of left the music to the side. And that was the wrong decision for sure. And at that point, this is like, I went to the master's program 2006 to 2008. 2008, I was kind of like, oh, wait a minute, I can't let that go. And what that felt like to me at the time was, I have to let this other thing go and just really focus on the music. If I were to tell you now, I would say, it's really important for me to find a balance of those two things. I kind of need both of those pieces in my life, but
there's a tension there that's healthy, right?
Yeah, exactly. And if I let one go, I miss it. If I let the other go, I miss it. And it's hard because I want to be able to just throw myself into both of them. But if I do that, I feel like I'm missing a piece, And so I have to kind of like find ways to like, okay, what can I study here? What can I work on that keeps my mind kind of working on problems and things like that. But then also I got to be, learning new music stuff and creating at the same time. And I think they kind of go together too, which is good, like they kind of inform each other. But yeah, so at that time I kind of just, I had tried to do something else and thought, no, I'm going to have to keep focusing on the music thing. This is 2000, like I said, 2008. So at that point, I finished being in that master's program at Northern Illinois University. And I was back here full time, and I had been like commuting back and forth every week, like living like 3 or 4 days in Illinois and then coming back home, and it was crazy. But so I just started trying to play as much as I could, but there was still that feeling of like I've got to figure something out quicker than building up a following, by playing little tiny gigs that don't pay me anything, because I have more responsibility than that now. Yeah. So that's kind of where several years later, where the voice idea came to mind, because I was just like, well, maybe this could be a jump start,
Yeah, and a jump start it was. So let's jump into that. So you make this decision, and then you're like, hey, let's see what could happen here. Take us through the thought of getting into the audition process, saying, I'm going to go for this thing. I'm going to go to try to be on the show called The Voice.
Yeah, it was strange. I mean, I was never one to watch like reality TV or any of the singing shows or anything like that, but I had seen one episode of like the first season of The Voice, like when it first started. And I remembered thinking like, if I was ever going to do one of these shows, this would be the one, because it seems a little more interesting than what's going on in the other ones. And so, several years later, I revisit that and thought, you know what, something has to happen. I got to at least take a stab at this. And so I just did the whole open call thing. I went on their website and found out where they were coming to. They were coming to St. Louis. That was the spring of 2013. So got ready I did all my stuff. And actually the audition ended up being summer 2013. My wife was in a car accident right before that, like a week or two ahead of the audition, broke her arm. We have 3 little kids. The morning of the audition, they're just running rampant around the house. She's like losing her mind. I was like, you know what? Nothing's going to come of this. Why don't I just stay home and help you? And she was like, no, you need to go and see what happens. I was like, all right. So took off, went to St. Louis, sat in the stadium all day long. I was one of the last people to go. I actually talked to the audition, the person who runs the casting company for The Voice. I was in her room to do my audition, and I remember talking to her after the fact, like after I had been on the show, and she was like, I remember when you came in. She was like, I was so exhausted, and I heard you sing, and I was like, oh my God, I have to sit here with this guy and let him come back. I can't just turn him away. So, but yeah, got the call back, had to drive home, come back 2 days later, do like a more in-depth, like where they do an interview on camera and record a couple of songs for the camera. And then found out I was going to be on the blind auditions later, and went through that whole process, and obviously it worked out. But yeah, it was a strange, like, it was one of those things that like anybody who knew me at the time was kind of like, oh wow, you're doing that? Like they wouldn't have thought that I would have like gone the singing show route. Yeah, I mean, it just kind of felt like I said, like I wanted to play music, and I needed to get from here to here quicker than what that was looking like it was going to be possible to do. And I just thought, well, maybe this could be the thing that does that.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's risk involved, right? I mean, you got kids, you got a wife, like you have a life. It's not like you're the 21-year-old dude, like, man, I'm just trying to make it in my van. Right. So was there ever a point once it starts, because what's the timeline? You're saying that's summer of 13. From that point to, last show you're winning what's the timeline there?
Almost a year. My final episode was like May 20th or something of the following year of 2014. So I had been going through the process for almost a year by the time I like won the show. And there was a lot of going out to Los Angeles and being away from my family, and that was difficult for me, and especially for them.
Was there ever a point during that year where you were like, I don't know if this is worth it, I'm gonna pull the plug, I don't want to finish this?
You know what, it always, not really, just because it just kept feeling like things were going right for me.
Yeah
On it. And so I don't know, it's just like I remember just having this feeling of like, I think I could win this thing. Like, which felt weird because it just felt like such a long shot, but it legitimately kind of felt that way throughout the process. And so I just, and yeah, I mean, I definitely know people who were on the show who had more of a struggle with that kind of thing and felt like, I'm doing things I don't want to be doing. And maybe I shouldn't have chosen this path, and I don't want to sing this song or whatever. But I just felt like I liked the music I was doing. Things were turning out well. And it just kind of always felt like, okay, this seems to be working out. And like I said, it was hard. It was hard for my family, but it just felt like, I mean, we were at the point where like, we needed me to get from here. There was some financial struggle at that time. So I was like, this seems like it could really open up some doors. So like it felt like the right thing to be doing at the time.
Yeah. Well, dude, I'd love to dedicate, just personally, I'd love to dedicate an episode of just telling all the stories of the whole season on The Voice. When you're with Blake Shelton, I'm like, what? But that'll be for another episode, because I'm enamored by it. We watched every episode when you were on it, and when you came home and did interviews with, Smiley here and the Smiley Morning Show, and just all of it. We were so stoked for you when you won, and I know a ton of Hoosiers were, and people all over the nation. The thing I will book another episode just to hear Voice stories. But the thing I want to hit on is you have a perspective that so many people that are chasing dreams don't. And I want to talk about that, because I think a lot of people feel like, maybe they've had the singing at Joe's story like you started with. And for them, they're singing at Joe's story for no money, at Joe's for no money is they were the intern, or they were trying to write a book, or they were thought about starting a company, or whatever it was, right? And they had the brass ring type of image. Like, if I could just do that, then all the problems would be gone. Then I would be always happy. Then, it would be easy street. And the perspective you have is you've been there, you've done that. You have the t-shirt, you got the DVD, we can search it on YouTube, right? You won The Voice, and you're still, a nationwide name. You got the fame and the fortune, but like, it's not like there was only one season of The Voice that you were on. You know what I mean? And it's not. I'm guessing. I don't know. Maybe you're going to say, "Yeah, actually, dude, I've not had a bad day in my life since that day when the confetti cannons went off."
No, it's not that.
So I guess like, maybe let's start like right after you win. Maybe that next year or so did it feel like this all makes sense? Did it feel like this is something I would love to have, this kind of attention, this kind of fame forever? This is better than I ever thought it would be. Like I guess before we talk about moving through that season and where you're at right now, during it, was it like, this is as great as I thought it would ever be? Or take us there.
Yeah, I remember telling a lot of people, like, I of course, right after I got that kind of question a decent amount, like, is this what you expected? And I remember really kind of telling people and thinking like, well, I don't know what expect. I think the thing, I didn't have a whole lot of, like, I didn't know what to expect. And so I didn't have a lot of like, this is what it's going to look like on the other side of this. Yeah, I mean, it was honestly a kind of a mix of emotions and feelings, just the way I felt about how it all turned out. So obviously, the one thing I was really looking for was like, can I just make a living doing music? And I was able to do that afterwards. I remember a couple of the gigs that came in right away, just being like, oh, I didn't know I could get that. So yeah, I mean, it opened up doors. I got to play shows that I never would have gotten to play. And some of those were amazing. And honestly, though, some of the time, a lot of it was what turned out to be the case was what I had to do to like keep making a living as the guy who was the winner of The Voice wasn't always stuff that I really loved doing. It just, that, for better or worse, that comes with like a little bit of like a thing. It's like, oh, you're the guy who won The Voice. and people, and everybody has their own image of what that's supposed to be and what that looks like, and there's something that comes along with it for them, and some people love that and some people hate that.
Yeah.
But and so I ended up doing like things that I like wasn't particularly passionate about, and they were good paychecks, but it was just kind of like, I don't know, I would feel, I'd feel depressed when I'd walk out on the stage, because it was just like, I don't feel like I'm like I'm very like, I don't know. I read a lot of stuff and study a lot of stuff that kind of like social critiques and the way that our society has become such a entertainment driven. And sometimes I felt like I'm just a part of that now. I'm just like this thing of like just throwing entertainment at people and what is the value that I'm giving them? And it wasn't always the case, but I definitely had that feeling as I'd walk out onto a stage sometimes, and I had to like really muster up the strength to like make it look like I was like hey, I'm having a good time out here. So it kind of took me, in retrospect, I really realized it kind of took me a little bit out of who I was, really, like who I actually am. And I was kind of like, there was a lot of like trying to take this person that I felt like, because I won The Voice, I'm supposed to be this thing. And I was trying to like mold that into a thing that fit what I felt like I really was. And it just kind of wasn't matching up and I couldn't make that work. I mean, honestly went through like because of some of that and trying to figure out purpose and stuff after that, I went through a pretty decent amount of time of like some serious like depression and just feeling kind of like hopeless about all of it, which is happily not where I am now. But so it wasn't all like, yeah, this is what I wanted. And there's also the work side of it too, where it's just like people think that when you win that show, like, oh, now you made it, like you've got it, which is absolutely not the case. I mean, those shows are about their show. They're not about the winners of the show. They're about like, let's get more viewers for the next season, so they're on to the next thing. And there still was a ton of like trying to like keep things going because everybody's ready to move on to the next thing, always about everything. So it definitely wasn't a thing of like, oh, all the problems are solved. I mean, like I said, I got some pretty surprisingly good paychecks for a while, but that all falls off after a little bit. And you have to keep like, okay, now what? Now, how do I figure this out now? What do I need to do that's going to work next? And yeah, it was really a process of trying to like reevaluate and refigure out myself, and really kind of like over the last couple of years, it's really been like, okay, now I remember who I am. And I need to like recapture that,
Well, Josh, it's interesting to me to think about, if we were to bookend the story of, the tension that you're living in, do I finish the master's degree? Do I really go all music? Right. There was a tension we talked about there, right? Of like, who am I? Am I this master's degree academic guy? Am I the music guy? And then, the music thing blows up in great ways, but then it's almost like the process of still like, who am I? Who am I? And who can I be to find the peace that I need to find the joy that I need to find the things that really do sustain. And I think it's interesting because it's almost like whether it's fame or fortune or school or whatever, is that process has to come, I think, from the inside out, right? Not necessarily the outside in. And I'm wondering if it kind of sounds like maybe through some of that, working through some of the depression and some of that was that process of going, man, who's Josh Kaufman in here? You know what I mean? Not in the lights, not in this, like, and just watching a little bit of your life from, living in Indy and you being, in the area is, I think you've processed through that successfully. And, it's like, you don't see, sometimes you see somebody who, maybe they had I always feel sad when you see the person who had the one hit wonder, like in 1986. And then like, they're like at the state fair, like wearing the same outfit they had on their album cover from 86, with the same hair. And it's like, bro, look, and that was 86,
right.
Like you're not doing that, but you're still making steps to really become, who I believe that God's created you to be. And that I want to maybe just, can we get to a little bit of the faith side of things, because that's been a little bit of a journey for you too, as far as kind of where faith was, growing up, through the college, years, figuring that out, the voice years, and even now it's at a different place for you as far as your connection, to faith and to God. Unpack some of that journey as well, because I think it parallels there in some cool ways.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So I was raised in church. It was a huge part of my life. I was there every Sunday and Wednesday. I sang solos at church and was in when I lived in Florida. I was in high school and I was in this traveling choir that went around and sang in churches every summer. It was a big part of who I was. And as I, because of the nature of just how I am and the way I think about things, I started to ask questions as I got older, and I started to really think about, okay, what does this all mean? How can I process this? Does it all make sense to me? And I came to a point when I was in college that I just kind of had to throw it all out. And even to this day, I think that was what I had to do. I had to throw it all out and start over. I remember I had a philosophy professor at Anderson University who I talked to about some of it at the time. And he was like, well, maybe make sure you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. And which, that was good advice. But at the time, and even still, I kind of questioned whether there was a baby there at all. I felt like it was all bathwater and it just all had to kind of start from scratch, And so my idea then was I just want truth. Okay. I just, whatever that looks like, I don't care. It can be God, it can be no God, it can be Buddhism, it can be Christianity, it can be whatever. I don't know, but I want to know what that is. And I want to try and figure that out from nothing, without any assumptions about what it has to be. And for 20 years ish, after that, up until just recently, I was what I would call an agnostic leaning towards atheism. So I wasn't 100% sure either way, but if you asked me to bet on it, I would have bet on there not being anything other than what we see here. But I always had this kind of searching thing, and there was always a part of me that kind of wished that I could believe it. It's hard to describe that. It makes makes you feel like, oh, well, you just want it to be true, and maybe that's why I am where I am now. But it was just kind of there was something that I was still this inner longing for something, and that never seemed to go away. And so that was the case. That was the version of me through all of this process, all the voice. I mean, it was all kind of okay, I'm just trying to figure out the things that work for me. What is the best I can be? Ethics and morality. That was what I really focused on in my philosophy studies. That was all really important to me. I wanted to be the right version of me. I wanted to do the most I could for the world. And what does that look like? And how am I good? What is it to be good? But I always felt like I was never getting there. It felt kind of like spinning wheels, and no matter what I tried, it was just kind of I don't know. It just wasn't coming together. Last summer, this is post the worst depression I've ever gone through. Last summer, I was when I was 18, 19 years old, I was a huge C.S. Lewis fan. I read all bunches of his books. And really interestingly, I thought I had read his book, Surprised by Joy, and had an idea of what it was about. And I think probably I just kind of knew some of the content of it. And I decided I'm going to revisit that book. Well, it turns out it wasn't a revisit at all. I realized as I got into it, I was I've never read this. Why did I think I've read this? and as and I don't know how familiar you are with that book. It's basically C.S. Lewis's recounting of his early life. Basically, it's an autobiography of his early life leading up to his conversion from atheism to Christianity. And
I think I'm in the same place as you are. In my brain, I'm like, yeah, I think I've read that one already, but maybe I haven't. So maybe I need to go for a refresh. That's not a refresh too.
Yeah. But as I read through, as he really started getting into the, like, what convinced him and kind of the process of, like, his whole idea of joy is that he found that as he was growing up in, like, literary works, because that was his thing, like medieval literature and that sort of thing. He would read these works and he'd feel this sense of, like, a longing, like, oh, and I love that, I want that, like, but then you reach out for it and you really try to get it and it's not there, and, like, you could never get that thing that you desired, like, whatever that was. It's like, there are these little things like memories or whatever creates that for you, and I could totally relate to that, this feeling of, like, oh, there are these things about life that are, like, there's this sense of awe and beauty that you sometimes experience that has kind of there's almost like a melancholiness to it, because it's like this unattainable desire and longing for something. And what he kind of came to the conclusion of is that thing that he called joy was like the longing for a connection to God, and that it made sense. Okay, well, any other desire that we have, any other longing we have, there's something that fulfills that. And it didn't make sense to him that there's this desire that he has that's unfulfillable. Why would that be the case? But he found that fulfillment had to be in God, because God is, in a sense, in some ways, unattainable from here, but also in a sense attainable if you foster some sort of relationship there. And that's kind of part of it. It's a lot more complicated than that, and there's a lot more that led up to it for him. But it just all started to connect with me, and some other experiences that went on that I can only say felt like God speaking to me, that just happened. And I came to a place where I couldn't deny it, like, which I think was a hard place for me to get to, and maybe the reason it took 20 years, because I'm so like analytical, and I think through everything, and I think that you can't think your way to God. You can't argue your way to it 100%. You can make some arguments, but it has to happen, like you said, from the inside out. I can't tell you the thing that's going to, like, convince you of it. It has to happen from in here, and that's what happened. And I can it's just that and a switch. It was like a switch for me there's a point in Lewis's book that's beautiful. He talks about when he actually, like, he had kind of already decided, okay, I'm not an atheist anymore. I believe there has to be a God. I don't know what that looks like. And he said the place when he went from just God to, like, specifically Christianity was this really innocuous little experience. So he said, I can't even explain to you. I went on a car ride. Somebody picked me up, and I was meeting my brother at the zoo. When I got in that car, I wasn't a Christian. And when I got there, I was. It's just I thought that was the turning point, something that I was like, okay. And that's sort of the feeling, is just like, because of the fact that it's not it wasn't like I read an argument and then it was like, oh, there it is, I thought my way through it to it finally. It was just this, like I said, it felt like a switch, like an awareness. And another Lewis kind of quote that's not a full quote, because I don't know it word for word, but he talks about how for him Christianity was like the sun in the sky, and it's not only that you see the sun, but the sun changes how you see everything else. It lights your way of seeing the whole world, and changes how everything looks to you and how you perceive everything. And that really became the case for me for the last almost year, I guess I would say. That was back in August of 2019 that I kind of, like, went through this. And it's interesting. Yeah, it's really, I'm still I'm still doing a lot of the same things, but I feel more of a fulfillment, and I feel like there's more of a direction to things than I've had in probably ever. and and certainly more of a peace than I've ever had. I remember. I know I'm kind of rambling here.
No, dude, this is good. I love it. Keep going.
But I remember a specific day when I was in my early 20s, looking out. I was visiting home in Virginia where my stepdad and mom live. And I remember sitting outside, looking out over the mountains into the sky. And I remember feeling like everything got sort of, everything felt blurrier and darker. So it's weird. I can't even fully describe it, but I feel like I feel like that memory is like the symbol of me letting God go and God letting me go, and being like, this is where you have to go, and this is how it's going to be for a while. And I feel like that's what the world was for 20 years, and a light went on however many months ago, and that sun that kind of like changes the way you view everything, changes that perspective, was suddenly there. And I can't explain it, and I certainly don't have like my theology worked out. That's something I've been thinking a lot about over the last few months, because part of what made me turn away from what I believed was some of the stuff that people who were religious told me. I had a Bible professor at Anderson who said, everything we know about God and can say about God is like one tiny drop in an entire ocean of what God actually is. And I just remember thinking, well, why do we say anything at all then, if we're that far from knowing it? And which made me sort of turn away from it. But ultimately, when I thought that kind of through, but now I still see that somewhat the same way. But I think that part of the value there is understanding that it has to be internal, understanding that sometimes it has to be wordless and inexplicable, understanding that I can't always get in an argument and convince somebody because there's nothing to convince. There isn't. It's just this thing that I hope you can have, because it certainly feels like truth, and it feels right, and it feels like the same sort of truth as like when I make an argument to you, but it's a kind of truth that I can't fully put into an argument, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
And so I'm not able to 100% put it into words, but I think that's partly kind of over the last, I don't know, however many 100 years since the Enlightenment. That's kind of where I think religion, especially maybe Christianity, has gone wrong, in that everything we felt like, because of the Enlightenment and the power of science and explaining things, we had to be able to explain these other things too, that I think are probably unexplainable, and we have to be content with that. And sometimes we need silence more than we need an argument. and that's kind of, so I think I had to come to a place where I could be at peace with uncertainty, and knowing that truth was probably bigger than what I could say, a lot bigger. Wow. Yeah.
Josh, I don't know that you know how beautifully profound what you just described is. Man, it's like, as I hear you talk, it's like God has created you. You have the mind of a professor, but the heart of an artist. And I think that process that you've gone through, this awakening, is such a cool. I love that God is that good of a dad, that, like you said, maybe it's that moment in that mountain where things got dark, and it was like, hey, like you need to go on this journey. Like,
right.
You need to go. And like, I know, like, he always knew where you were. Right.
Right.
But for you to become like your brain has always been your brain, the way he created it to be, the way you love to absorb knowledge and things have to make sense. And you want to, philosophically and all those things and everything that Lewis was in his writing. But Lewis was also such an amazing such an amazing artist and creative talent that
Right.
he was able to create word images and pictures in whole new worlds, right? That allowed us to experience something that was profoundly intellectually true, but yet he created it in a way that our hearts and our souls could experience it. And I think, I'm so excited, Josh, for what you create in the next, I'm going to say in the next 2 to 3 years.
Yeah.
I think there's a chance that you maybe start creating things that, and I don't care if they sell, 10 million records. I hope they do for you, because that'd be great. But the connection, I think right now that now you could be in a place where mind, body, and soul are now communicating in tandem, and together within you, that, there's still a tension. And I think there's always got to be that tension. And probably, the spiritual DNA course that I teach, it helps people find, their voice. That's funny. The voice is their voice in God's kingdom. Right. And Ephesians 4 talks about that God has created some to be apostles, some to be prophets, some to be evangelists, some to be shepherds and teachers. And I don't know, I'm taking a shot in the dark. I wouldn't be surprised if your voice within God's kingdom is that of a prophet. And the other word you can use for prophet is creative, a prophet creative. Sure. And there's a what they call a prophetic dissonance that happens in the life of a prophet a lot, because your soul and your spirit can perceive things as they are. You can interpret the times and what things are and think deeply about them. Oftentimes a very introverted person. And there's a dissonance because you see things as they should be and could be, but yet you also see them clearly as they are. And sometimes when there is dissonance there, it's difficult to stay the course, because things are not as they could or should be. And you see it and you actually feel it more deeply than most. And I wouldn't be surprised if that's who God's, created you to be. And that's the gift that your voice will be to the world, man. He's given you an amazing physical voice that brings joy to people. But I'm so excited to see what art that you create in this next season, because I think it's going to be intellectually deep, but yet filled with a weightiness of what I love. That sometimes that can't be argued. You just have to feel it, and your spirit receives it, man. So beautiful, dude. So good.
Interesting,
Josh.
man. That's really helpful to hear. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Well, dude, we have to have a follow-up at some time. This was, I didn't realize this is I love this kind of, we got into the deep weeds. This is good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Josh, how can I know you're putting stuff together. We'll land the plane here. How can people stay connected to you and be able to see the new stuff you're creating of what you're doing artistically and just where you're at in life? How can they stay connected?
Definitely all the social media stuff. Right now I'm doing. I've been doing a couple of Facebook Lives a week, every Monday and Thursday night, just doing shows, taking requests. I play for about an hour. And that's been fun. And it's a good way to connect with people, since obviously most of the gigs have disappeared because of the current situation. So, any of those places, I'll always keep updated on what I'm doing. I'm actually working on a ton of stuff. I'm producing an album for somebody, and then I have a ton of new music that is either finished and ready to go or in the works, and hopefully I'll be done with in the next year or so. A lot of interesting, kind of what you were talking about, like what's going to come out in the next couple of years, because I definitely like what I'm making now is I'm really excited about, and it's different. It's different both in terms of it's what it looks like artistically, but also in terms of its like lyrical content and kind of what I'm finding myself having to say. So yeah.
Josh, it's so beautiful. I can't wait to hear it and do whatever I can to let as many people as I can know what you're doing. So stay connected to Josh, and he's gonna lead you somewhere deep. I can guarantee you that. It's beautiful stuff. Josh, thanks so much for taking the time, dude. It's been such an inspiration, and I can't wait till we talk again.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
And we're back. Oh, so good. It's like we go over to like some kind of like new place called like Interview Land, and then we come back. You know, it'd be neat if I could get like, remember Mr. Rogers had that little train that would take you to like whatever the little imagination land was? We need to get a little train back here. And then I push the button and then the train comes back. Wouldn't that be neat? Anyway, hey, welcome back to the interview with Josh Kaufman. Thanks so much to Josh for being a part of the podcast and just opening up his journey to us. That's not easy to do. And so, Josh, huge thank you for being on the podcast and sharing. And man, I love the moments there at the end of the interview where we're kind of putting together, real time, this connection for Josh of like, this kind of the professor's brain and the poet and prophet's heart. And man, I'm excited to see from Josh. It was awesome to watch him accomplish what he did when he did. And obviously he's not done accomplishing. But what I love is being around him in the interview. I was able to see him here actually last week at another event. And what I'm sensing and what I'm excited to see from Josh is what? He may never win another nationwide show. He may never sell 1 million copies of his next CD. But when I talk to him and when I'm around him, you get the sense that he's a man at peace. He's at peace with God. He's at peace with himself. He's at peace with others. And he's stepping into these moments fully present. And that's what I want for you. That's what I want for me. And I'm talking a lot about my counselor, but just because it's where I learned so much is this past week, my counselor hit me with a quote that is, I think I'm getting a new tattoo, and it's going to be this. It's like my new life motto. Because and here's the context before I hit you with the quote is, I'm an ENFP, Enneagram 7, pioneer, apostle, visionary type of person. And through my life, I've been very fortunate to have God put some dreams in my life and chase them and experience them. And I love that process. But what I can say is I don't know that my life has been one of a ton of peace. I've accomplished things, and when I have failed at things, I have really struggled with beating the crap out of myself and feeling terrible for a while. And now I'm getting old enough that I'm going, maybe I don't just want to pursue accomplishments at the lack and at the absence of peace. And my counselor hit me with this quote, and this may not hit for you if God's made you different in the way you process your life and where you're at. For me, and if you're anything like me, maybe this will hit for you. But it's actually a quote from Rob Bell in one of his books back from about 2017 called The Bible. Fascinating book. I just finished listening to it, and I loved it. It's just 4 words, and the quote is this: the action is here. The action is here. And let me apply this for you in the context of what we're talking about, because this has been huge for me. Is so often when I'm thinking about accomplishments for God, what I have to come back to is whatever I'm dreaming about doing with or for God, what I've got to come back to and say, no, listen, Daron, the real action is here. It's in this moment. It is being present in the peace of God now. Because if I miss the action that is here, I will miss or sabotage or never fully embrace the action of what God is doing in the future. Hope is found in the future, but peace, the place of peace, is the present. So the action is here. As I'm working through finding peace with myself and my failures and my struggles, and as I'm walking through and trying to learn to be self-compassionate for myself and present in what's going on, I can think about all the things. For me, I love to think about all the things I'm going to do to get better. I'm a self-development addict, okay? I'm reading and working all of the time to get better. And if I talk to somebody and let you know, hey, here's all the things I'm going to do. I'm doing this and I want to do this and I'm going to try this. And then I'm going to read this book. And right now I'm listening to this book. Right now I got 4 or 5 books from this to, and I'm going to journal. I'm going to counseling. And here's all the here. And it becomes to be exhausting. And I'm always looking at the things I'm going to do to get to where, and the action is here in this moment, right now, today. Am I present in the peace of God and extending peace to myself? Because the action is here. Or what about peace with others, which we talked about as well? This one's a challenge for me too. Maybe it is for you. I want you to think about maybe the person that you have you're running the highest deficit of grace with right now. Could be a brother, sister, parent, maybe a spouse. It's somebody who's close to you, because the closer you are to people, the more time you spend with them, the more you hurt them, the more you disappoint them. It's just what we do to each other. And what God is doing in me right now is I'm embracing, and this is difficult for me, is I want to go out in the future, right, where hope is found. And I want to get lost in future ideas. Someday, we could go on a trip and experience that, or someday we'll have these kind of moments, or maybe it's with my kids. I could just imagine and dream about, we go on this vacation and we have these moments, or when they get a little older and this, and I can throw my ideas out to when things could be better, when things would be more healed in different relationships. If I have strained relationships with friends or whatever it may be, is out there somewhere. That's where I'll really do it. And what God has got me focusing on is this. The action is here. What am I doing right now, right here today, to work towards and to experience peace with others? How am I stepping into receiving and extending mercy and forgiveness to experience peace with God, peace with myself, and peace with others as I pursue the dreams of God? Because I am moving into the future, but the land of the present is where peace is found. And guess what? The action is here. So you may feel like the accomplishment of dreams for you is years away. Maybe you feel like the relationship and peace with God that you want to experience is decades away because of things that you've done in your life. Maybe for you, the idea of actually being alone in silence and stillness and solitude with yourself and feeling peace feels like an absolute impossibility. Or maybe it's with others. You've been hurt so badly by someone, or you've hurt other people that you think, there's no way that I can find peace with them in the future. I want to tell you this. If you can focus on the fact that the action is here, today you can step into mercy and forgiveness, and God can begin to do the work and continue the work in you to where you step into that future hope that you see. But don't miss the fact, friend, the action is here and it's now. And I want to leave you with this as we close. I got 3 scriptures that talk about peace. And my thought for you is I just want to read these for you, and might even put a little music in the background for you just so you can kind of have a moment. And I just want to read these scriptures over you and let you just kind of enjoy them and let them maybe speak to you and lead you to just a place of hope and of peace. If you're driving or doing something active, I would strongly suggest you don't close your eyes, because but if you can, just let these scriptures lead you to the place of peace that God needs to lead you to. From Psalm 23. The Lord is my best friend. and my shepherd. I always have more than enough. He offers a resting place for me in his luxurious love. His tracks take me to an oasis of peace, the quiet brook of bliss. That's where he restores and revives my life. He opens before me pathways to God's pleasure, and he leads me along in his footsteps of righteousness so that I can honor his name. Lord, even when your path takes me through the valley of deepest darkness, fear will never conquer me, for you already have. You remain close to me and lead me through it all the way. Your authority is my strength and my peace. The comfort of your love takes away my fear. I'll never be lonely, for you are near. 2 Thessalonians 3:16 says, Now may the Lord himself, the Lord of peace, pour into you his peace in every circumstance and in every possible way. The Lord's tangible presence be with you all. And lastly, Philippians 4:6-7 says, Don't be pulled in different directions or worried about a thing. Be saturated in prayer throughout each day, offering your faith-filled requests before God with overflowing gratitude. Tell him every detail of your life. Then God's wonderful peace that transcends human understanding will make the answers known to you through Christ Jesus. Peace, my friends. It's what Christ died for. It's what you were created for. It's what you want to enjoy, and will be the thing that takes you through the process and the path towards God's purposes in your life. God bless you. I love you so much. Thanks for joining me in this episode of the Daron Earlewine Podcast. And until we talk again, remember 3 things. God is for you, not against you. God is near you, not far from you. And God has created you on purpose and for a purpose. Have a great week. We'll talk to you next time right here on the Daron Earlewine Podcast.